He looked at her name tag, then at her scuffed shoes, and sneered. To Harrison Sterling, the waitress standing before him wasn't a person. She was a prop in his play of wealth and dominance. He thought that by switching to an obscure, aristocratic dialect of French, he could strip her of her dignity in front of his date. He thought he was the smartest person in the room. He was wrong. He didn't know that the woman holding his menu wasn't just a waitress, and the few words she was about to speak would not only silence the table, but dismantle his entire life. This is the story of how arrogance met its match. The air inside l'Orangerie, Manhattan's most ostentatious French bistro, smelled of truffle oil, expensive perfume, and old money. For Sarah Bennett, however, it mostly smelled of exhaustion. Sarah adjusted the waistband of her black slacks, which were a size too big, and held up by a safety pin hidden beneath her crisp white apron. It was 8:15 p.m. on a Friday. The dinner rush was hitting its peak, a cacophony of clinking crystal and the low, dull roar of conversations that cost more per minute than Sarah made in a week. Table 4 needs water. Table 7 wants to send the sea bass back because it looks sad. Move, Bennett, move. The hiss came from Charles Henderson, the floor manager. Henderson was a man who believed that sweating was a sign of incompetence. He was currently hovering near the host stand, wiping an imaginary smudge off a leather-bound menu. "On it, Charles," Sarah said, keeping her head down. She grabbed a carafe of iced water, ignoring the sharp stabbing pain in her left arch. She had been on her feet for 9 hours. Her shoes, generic non-slips, bought from a discount store in Queens, were disintegrating. Sarah Bennett was 26 years old. To the patrons of l'Orangerie, she was a silhouette in black and white. She was the hand that refilled the wine, the voice that recited the specials, and the object that absorbed their complaints. They didn't see the dark circles she carefully concealed with drugstore concealer. They certainly didn't know that 3 years ago, Sarah had been a doctoral candidate in comparative linguistics at the Sorbonne in Paris, one of the brightest minds in her cohort before the phone call came. The accident, her father's stroke, the medical bills that swallowed their savings like a sinkhole. She had left Paris overnight. She traded the library for the tray, the lecture hall for the noisy dining room. She did what she had to do to keep her father in the care facility upstate. "Sarah," Henderson snapped again. "VIPs walking in. Table 1. Best view. Don't mess this up." Sarah looked toward the heavy oak doors. The host, a trembling teenager named Kevin, was bowing lightly as a couple entered. The man walked in first, which told Sarah everything she needed to know. He was tall, wearing a navy bespoke suit that fit him a little too tightly across the shoulders, as if to emphasize his gym routine. He had the kind of face that was handsome in a magazine, but cruel in motion, sharp jaw eyes that scanned the room to see who was watching him. This was Harrison Sterling. Sarah recognized the name from the credit card receipts. Harrison was a hedge fund manager who had made headlines recently, not for his returns, but for his aggressive, hostile takeovers. He was new money trying desperately to look like old money. Trailing behind him was a woman who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. She was stunning, wearing a deep red dress, but her posture was closed off. Her arms crossed defensively. This was Jessica, though Sarah didn't know her name yet. Jessica looked nervous. "Right this way, Monsieur Sterling," Kevin squeaked. Harrison didn't acknowledge the boy. He strode to table 1, the prime spot by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city lights. He sat down, spreading his legs wide, claiming the space. Sarah took a deep breath. She smoothed her apron. Just get through the shift, she told herself. Rent is due Tuesday. Dad needs his physical therapy. She walked over to the table, her face composed into the mask of pleasant servitude she wore like armor. Good evening, Sarah said, her voice soft and professional. Welcome to l'Orangerie. My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Harrison didn't look up. He was busy inspecting the silverware, turning a fork over in the light to check for spots. Sparkling water, Harrison said to the fork, and bring the wine list, the reserve list, not the one you give the tourists. Of course, sir, Sarah said. She glanced at the woman. And for you, miss. Jessica offered a small, apologetic smile. Just still water, please. Thank you. Harrison finally looked up. His eyes landed on Sarah. He didn't look at her face. He looked at her cheap shoes, then up to her hands, which were red from handling hot plates. A sneer curled his lip. He had identified her status in the hierarchy of his world zero. Wait, Harrison said, just as Sarah turned to leave. Yes, sir. Make sure the glass is actually clean this time, he said, loud enough for the neighboring table to hear. Last time I was here, the stemware was foggy. It's hard to get good help these days, isn't it? Sarah felt a flush of heat rise up her neck, but she forced her expression to remain blank. I will personally inspect the glasses, sir. You do that? He dismissed her with a wave of his hand, like swatting a fly. As she walked away, she heard him laugh, a dry, barking sound. He leaned in toward Jessica. You have to be firm with them, Jess. Otherwise they walk all over you. It's a power dynamic. You wouldn't understand. Sarah reached the service station, her hands trembling slightly. She gripped the counter. He's a nightmare, whispered Tonya the bartender as she polished a glass. He tipped 5% last time and tried to get the valet fired because it was raining. I can handle him, Sarah said, though a knot of dread was tightening in her stomach. She had handled rude customers before. But there was something about Harrison Sterling, a predatory glint in his eyes that suggested he was bored. And men like Harrison Sterling, when bored, liked to play games with people they considered beneath them. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere at Table 1 had shifted from tense to suffocating. Sarah approached with the appetizers. She balanced the heavy tray on one shoulder, her posture perfect despite the ache in her spine. She placed the foie gras au torchon in front of Harrison and the salade lyonnaise in front of Jessica. Enjoy, she murmured, turning to refill their wine glasses. She had brought a 2015 Chateau Margaux, a bottle that cost more than her father's monthly care. Harrison held up a hand, stopping her from pouring. He swirled the wine already in his glass, sniffing it ostentatiously. It's corked, he announced. Sarah paused. She knew wine. She had smelled the cork herself when she opened it at the station. It was pristine. The wine was perfect. I apologize, sir, Sarah said gently. I opened it myself just moments ago. Perhaps it needs a moment to breathe. Harrison slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. The restaurant went quiet for a heartbeat. Jessica flinched. Are you arguing with me? Harrison asked, his voice raising an octave. I said it's corked. Do you know who I am? Do you know how much wine I buy? I don't need a waitress with... What is that, a Queen's accent? Telling me about Bordeaux. He wasn't just complaining. He was performing. He was trying to assert dominance in front of Jessica, trying to look like a connoisseur by belittling the staff. I will fetch the sommelier immediately, sir, Sarah said, her voice tight. No. Harrison smiled, a cruel, thin expression. Don't bother the sommelier. He's busy with important tables. You can take this back. And bring me the menu again. I've lost my appetite for the foie gras. It looks rubbery. Sarah took the plate. She took the wine. She walked back to the kitchen, her face burning. In the kitchen, the chef, a large man named Henri, who actually was French, dipped a spoon into the returned sauce. Rubbery. This man is an imbecile. The texture is perfect. He's putting on a show, Sarah said, leaning against the stainless steel counter. He wants a reaction. Don't give him one, Henri warned. Henderson is watching. If Sterling makes a scene, Henderson will fire you to save face. We all know it. Sarah nodded. She couldn't lose this job. She needed the tips from tonight. She returned to the table with the menus. Harrison was leaning back, looking pleased with himself. Jessica looked miserable. I'm sorry about him. Jessica mouthed silently to Sarah when Harrison looked away to check his watch. Sarah gave a tiny nod of acknowledgement. So, Harrison said, opening the menu without looking at it. He stared directly at Sarah. I feel like something authentic tonight. But reading this English description is so boring. It lacks the soul of the dish. He smirked. Tell me, do you speak French? This is a French restaurant, is it not? I know the menu items, sir, Sarah said. The menu items, he mocked. Bonjour, baguette, oui, oui. That's about the extent of it for someone like you, I assume. Sarah bit the inside of her cheek. I can help you with any questions you have, sir. I doubt it. Harrison laughed. He looked at Jessica. Watch this, babe. You can always tell the quality of an establishment by the education of the staff. He turned back to Sarah, his eyes gleaming with malice. He took a breath and switched languages. But he didn't just speak French. He spoke a rapid-fire, overly florid and archaic version of French, peppered with slang that he likely picked up from a semester abroad or a pretentious tutor. He was trying to be difficult on purpose. Écoutez-moi, ma petite. Harrison sneered, his accent thick and exaggerated heavy on the guttural R's. Je veux que vous disiez au chef que je veux le canard, mais seulement si la peau est croustillante comme du verre. Et apportez-moi un autre vin, quelque chose qui ne goûte pas le vinaigre. Comprenez-vous? Ou est-ce que je parle trop vite pour ton petit cerveau? Translation. Listen to me, my little one. I want you to tell the chef I want the duck, but only if the skin is crispy like glass. And bring me another wine, something that doesn't taste like vinegar. Do you understand? Or am I speaking too fast for your little brain? He sat back, crossing his arms, a smug grin plastered on his face. He waited for the blank stare. He waited for her to stammer to say, I'm sorry I don't understand, so he could roll his eyes and demand a manager who spoke the language of civilization. Jessica looked down at her lap, humiliated on Sarah's behalf. Harrison, stop it. Just order in English. No, no. Harrison chuckled, keeping his eyes on Sarah. It's standard. If she works here, she should know. Look at her. She's completely lost. It's pathetic, really. Probably wondering if I asked for ketchup. Sarah stood perfectly still. The sounds of the restaurant faded away. She looked at Harrison Sterling, a man who thought money bought intelligence, who thought a suit bought class. She remembered the lecture halls of the Sorbonne. She remembered her thesis on the evolution of aristocratic dialects in 18th century France. She remembered the long nights debating philosophy in cafes in the Latin Quarter, with professors who had forgotten more about language than Harrison would ever know. She looked at his smug face. The exhaustion in her feet seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He wanted a show. She would give him one. She didn't reach for her notepad. She didn't call for Henderson. She simply clasped her hands in front of her apron, tilted her head slightly, and locked eyes with him. The silence at the table stretched for 3 seconds. Harrison's smile began to falter just slightly. He expected confusion. He didn't expect the icy calm that settled over the waitress's face. Then Sarah opened her mouth. Sarah did not blink. She did not stammer. She adjusted her posture, shifting her weight so that she stood tall, looming slightly over the seated billionaire. When she spoke, the tone of her voice changed completely. Gone was the flat, subservient monotone of the American waitress. In its place was the rich, resonant timbre of a woman who had spent 5 years defending dissertations in the hallowed halls of the Sorbonne. She answered him in French, but it wasn't just French. It was an exquisite, fluid, high Parisian dialect, enunciated with a precision that made Harrison's attempt sound like a toddler banging on a piano. "Monsieur," she began, her voice carrying smoothly over the low hum of the dining room.